Hi and welcome to Mini Adventure. I wanted to say a brief word about safety before we start the video. Safety is very important. Just want to remind everyone to be safe while they're working on their vehicles. Be careful. If you're crawling under the vehicle, make sure it's properly supported and you got jack stands under it. If you're going to be working around any flammable fluids, gasoline, make sure you're in a well ventilated area. If you're going to be working with brake fluid or anything like that, be careful. If you get any of that kind of brake fluid on your exterior finish of your car, if you don't immediately wipe it up, it'll start peeling the paint off. Just encourage everyone to think before you do something. If something doesn't look safe, stop, re-examine what you're doing, and make sure that what you're doing is safe. I always recommend to wear a pair of mechanics wear gloves. Now, you may see me not wearing them sometimes. That's because if I have to reach up in there and get the proper feel for a bolt or a fastener, and then just sometimes you can't grab it when you have gloves on. But just be careful. If the engine's still hot, make sure you let it cool down. Of course, never open the radiator while the engine's still hot. I know if you've worked on cars for a while, a lot of these things, you know, you're saying, well, why is he telling me all this? Well, someone may be watching this video that's new to working on cars and they may not think about that. A lot of people have been scalded really badly by opening up a radiator. It seems like common sense, but all the time you hear about those kind of things happening. So just want to bring safety to the forefront and think about that whenever you're doing something, that you remember always safety first. And once again, thanks for tuning in to Mini Adventure. Hi and welcome to the first episode of Mini Adventure. What I've got right here, this is my wife's 2007 Mini Cooper S Turbo, and she's always wanted one as long as we've been married, and I told her that if we got one, that I will learn how to work on it. And so I got it in the shop today because about a week ago it just died on us while we were driving down the road. I've already checked the spark. It's got a good spark. The fuel pump works. So in my course of troubleshooting this thing, I decided to pull the valve cover off and check the timing chain, since that is one of the things that is problematic on this vehicle. As a matter of fact, they're in the middle of settling a big lawsuit about timing chain replacement on these vehicles. So I figured I would go ahead and check the timing chain on her vehicle while it was down anyway, in case it needed to be fixed. So why don't we take a look at it and we'll determine what's going on with the timing chain. Alright, so here we have the engine compartment, and I've already done a little bit of work on trying to get this thing done, so some of the stuff is already disconnected. But what you need to do, of course, is you need to go ahead and pull all of the spark plug wires off and pull your coil packs out. And I like to keep them in order, so I'll set them over here on my workbench in order. Okay, then you're going to have to release this tube here that goes to your vacuum pump. You just squeeze it on each side and it pulls off. And you need to release your camshaft sensor, which is here. Disconnect this cable here. This cable right here, this hose, is part of your breather system, and it has a clip on it that clips down over this and holds it in. It's a little bit difficult to get out because of the way it clips, but you'll remove that, disconnect the breather hose, and then there's a breather hose back here that you have to disconnect, and it's got a squeeze clamp on it too. So you pull it off, and then you've got your map sensor here that you'll take off, and it has clips that clips to the front of the valve cover, so you need to take a pair of those pliers and pull those off, and then you can set that off to the side. And then you have all of your valve cover bolts that you'll have to remove. All the bolts are the same except for these two bolts here in the back, and they're 10 millimeter, so you just pull those out, and then your valve cover will come off. So when we pull the valve cover off, be very, very careful with it. I looked on eBay, these things are running about $350, so don't drop it and break it. And if you'll look, you'll notice right here on the engine, there should be an upper guide right here. There's your bracket, and you'll notice that it's broken off. And I'll show you. This is what the new one looks like right here. And it's got brackets that come out on either side. Well, all of that plastic and part of that bracket is missing, and if you look down in the rocker or in the valley cover down here, I don't see any plastic at all. I don't see a piece of metal either. The same thing, so it's probably made its way down inside the timing chain valley here, and that goes directly down into the oil pan. So what I'm going to end up having to do is, once I get the timing chain changed out, I'll have to pull the oil pan off and clean it out and make sure that there's no metal, there's no pieces of the plastic guide still in there. So now that I've determined what I have to do, now we're going to go ahead and get this thing prepped. It does take some special tools in order to do this. There's a special tool that bolts onto the back of your valley here that holds your camshafts in time, and you have to have that tool to do this job. If you try to do it without the tool, you're going to end up getting this thing out of time, and you'll probably never be able to get it back in time. It's extremely difficult to get back in time. So I've already ordered my kit and received my kit in, and it's got all the pieces that I need. I'll show you here what I've got. Got the upper guide, got your valve cover gasket, your left and right guides, and then here's the tensioner. This is the new tensioner right here, and it's supposed to be an upgraded version, which the reason why all this stuff broke is because the tensioner went bad, and that's what the lawsuit's over. They also give you new guide bolts and seal washers, a new chain, a new cam bolt, and a new sprocket. And another thing you'll need is, this is a set of serpentine belt wrenches, because instead of a standard square or a hex bolt, many decided to use this type of serrated nut on there. So I went ahead and bought a set of serpentine belt tools, and this is a 27 millimeter wrench used to hold the camshaft while you're torquing it down, because I don't want to put too much stress on the locking device and take a chance on breaking it while I'm having to torque the camshaft back down. And then of course this is going to be the oil pan gasket that we're going to need when we pull the oil pan off. So we're going to go ahead and get started getting this thing ready. Hopefully my timing tool, my camshaft locking tool will be in this afternoon, so I'm going to go ahead and get everything ready. We're going to go ahead, I want to go ahead and remove this bracket here, this brace in the front right here. It makes it easier to get in here because you're going to have to get to the front of the engine down in here, and so I want to get this bracket out of the way. I want to get this upper intercooler tube out, so I'm going to have to remove the headlight. I'm going to have to remove the inner fender liner, the passenger side front wheel, and that'll also make it easier to get all this stuff out, and it also makes it a lot easier for me to be able to shine my camera down there so everybody can see what I'm doing. So let me get everything ready, and then we'll start the recording here in a minute. Alright, well, since we're going to go ahead and take this upper brace off, we need to remove these bolts here and remove the driver's side headlight. You notice when you're taking it apart, you have 3 bolts that are the same. They go here, here, and here. But then you got this one up here at the top. The washer is bigger, so remember that when you put it back together, where the bigger washer goes, it goes on the top of the headlight on the outside. I notice that these are pretty big holes, and I guess that's the way they decide on how they want to adjust the headlight. And then you have one more down here. Yep, that always happens. I'll get that in just a second. We go ahead and pull the headlight out, and you have your connector here. You have to squeeze it on both sides, and it should pull off. Alright, now we're able to start working on taking this upper brace off, but we're going to need to pull this grill off. And the best thing to use for that, to pull that grill off, is going to be plastic trim removal tools, and I'll need to get those. And all right, I got a couple of plastic trim tools here that I'm going to use to take these blind plastic rivets off. If you look at them real close, there's an indentation. You slide your tool up under it, and you pry up on it very carefully. And once you get it loosened up a little bit, it should pop out. But I've got this one right here that's split. It should fit on either side, hopefully. Because you don't want to mess these rivets up. And you can get some new ones, but why get new ones when you have these that are just fine? Alright, got a little bit different one here. We're going to try to slide it up underneath here like so, and then just gently pry it out. And once you get that out, don't pull the pin all the way out like I just did, and just work your way around and do all of them the same way. Slowly work it out where you can get one side in there. It's probably the best $20 I ever spent right here. Torn up many a plastic piece trying to get these off. These things right here make it so much easier getting these trim tabs off, and almost all cars nowadays have them. So if you do any work at all on these, you either probably already have a set. If you don't, I would highly suggest getting some just to help you out in the future. So we got all 4 of these out. So we gently pry this grill out. If you sure don't want to buy one of these, go ahead and take the pins out. This thing should slide right off of the Now let me show you. Right behind this, right here where my finger is, there's a release to pull the edge of it off and to snap it out. Just be careful and don't mess up your grill just jerking on it. And then you just got to work yourself around. As you slide the grill out. All right. After a little bit of finagling and getting the light so I could see what I was doing, if you'll see down in here where my screwdriver is pointing, that's one of the clips that holds the grill on. So from this side right here, if we push on it, that's gonna release the grill, and you just have to do that all the way down on the rest of the grill. Alright, so I got the grill out, and I wanted to show you what it looks like out of the vehicle. But if you'll notice, if you look at the clips right here, you'll notice how it has a little catch right here. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to compress that and release it. Of course, they come from one side, and when you get to the middle, it switches over to the other side. So you've got 4 of this type, and then on each end you have one of these that you pull down like so, very gently, don't break that clip off, and then the grill will come out. Okay, so now we're ready to start working on taking this brace off here on the top. Now I've got 2 10mm bolts here and here, and then we've got some bigger 13mm here, and another clip that clips to the windshield washer reservoir to this brace. And once we undo these 2 bolts right here, they actually attach to the upper intercooler tube, which we need to get out of the way anyway. So that'll open all this up, so we'll be able to have more room, more access, easier to work on. Okay, so far I've removed these 2 bolts on each side. They're 13mm, and then these bolts are 10mm, and then I had to remove the torque screws on either side of the hood latch. There's 2 on each side, and of course I've removed these 2 bolts over here. Now when you lift this up, you'll notice, if you look real close, you'll notice that the cable to release the hood is attached to this metal bracket. So we're going to have to pop this cable out of here in order to get this upper piece off. Alright, I got the upper brace removed, and what I found once I was able to lift it up is that your passenger side latch, and then it routes through these clips, and then you have your driver's side latch here. It routes through this clip, and it clips on the top and the bottom. The one on the bottom actually goes to the driver's side, here. The one for the passenger side goes in the top, and it routes through this and then through this clip and over to the other side. Well, from there the cable goes up inside the car, as you can see. So I'm not going to go through all the trouble of disconnecting that, so what I did was just moved it over to the side of the car, and I just rested the brace up against the side of the car. I'm going to put a rag over it and make sure that it doesn't scratch the paint in case somebody knocks it over. But we wanted to get that out of the way so that we're not fighting that whenever we're trying to work on getting this intercooler tube off. Okay, what you're looking at now is down in front of the radiator, in between the engine. You can see down here on the intercooler tube, it bolts to the frame here. But in order to get to that, I had to pull this low side air conditioning bracket off. And both of those are T25 nuts. So you're going to need some Torx sockets. And I also forgot to mention that these Torx head bolts here for your latches, they're T30s. So the next thing I need to do to take off this intercooler is to take off that hose clamp right there. But it's pretty difficult to reach from the top. So since I got to remove the inner fender anyway, I'm going to go ahead and remove the inner fender. I've already taken the tire off. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by you watching me take the tire off. But if you'll notice, underneath the wheel well, the inner fender well is held on by these clips right here. And they are a Phillips screw head. So I'm going to go ahead and take those off, and so I can get to that intercooler pipe. Okay, on these inner fender fasteners, even though they have the Phillips head on them, they're still basically just like the ones that we took off on the grill. So sometimes when you go to turn that Phillips head, the whole fastener will spin. But if you'll take your trim tool and you slide it up underneath the connector like that and then turn the Phillips head, you can hold the fastener together as that thing unscrews. Then once you have it unscrewed, you can just pry it out just like the other ones. And you do all of them the same way. Okay, so I've got all the clips out. There are two Torx T30 bolts. The bolt right here and right here, and then there's a 10mm plastic nut that's under here, and then there's a Phillips screw that's under here that attaches the inner fender well to the front air dam. And then once you get all of that apart, then you'll notice that the inner fender well is split in the middle so that you can pull it out around the MacPherson strut. Once you work it out all the way around, okay, I found another plastic clip right under here, one of the Phillips type plastic clips. Found that under there. Once I release that, then the inner fender well will come right out. And now we're able to get a good look at where we're going to be working. You can see your air conditioning compressor there, your crankshaft pulley there. Well, as I was saying before I was interrupted by the air compressor, is there's your crankshaft pulley, and that's what we're going to have to turn in order to line up the camshafts to get ready to pull this timing chain out. And if you'll notice, if you look down there real close, it's actually starting to weep around the seal a little bit, so it's a good thing we get a new crankshaft seal with our timing chain kit. We can go ahead and change that out. And of course, the hodgepodge of wires that is under here for your horns and your fog lights. And then here's your drain hose here. And if you're wondering what all this brown stuff is, that's called Cosmoline, and that's something that they put on the vehicles to keep them from rusting when they're being shipped over here from overseas. But now that we're in here, we'll have a little bit better access to that intercooler hose clamp, which is a 7mm. Alright, well, in trying to get this Tobo intercooler pipe out, I managed to misplace my 7mm socket, so I ended up having to use a 7mm box end wrench to get under here and get this loose. I ended up having to take it off of the actual intercooler because I couldn't get the plastic pipe disconnected from the rubber hose. So I went ahead and just undid it right there from that entrance to the intercooler, or excuse me, exit from the intercooler, and just pulled it out the top. And one of the things, and here it is over here on the workbench, and one of the things I noticed looking down in there is there's a little bit of oil pulling up under there from my turbocharger. So I guess turbocharger's starting to leak a little oil. That would explain where the oil goes during the in-between oil changes. So now that I got all that out, as you can see now, I have really good access to my motor mount, which will have to come out. I'll have to support the engine with a jack and a block of wood underneath the oil pan to hold the engine in place while I take the motor mount out, because in order to get to the guide bolts for the timing chain guides, you have to remove this upper mount. So that'll be my next task, and we'll get that thing off and we'll go from there. Still waiting on my tool to come in though. Okay, well, I just got done pulling the serpentine belt off, and for lack of a better word, it's a little bit retarded the way they do things. Of course, you got to have the special wrench, which I showed you earlier, and when you put it on there, okay, you have to get it on the star. Okay, once you get it on there, then you just pull it back, take tension off the belt, and then as you can see, there's a spring-loaded pin right here that once you pull it back far enough, you push that pin in and it'll hold it in place. So after I did that, I figured, okay, well, the belt should come right off. Well, not so fast. I don't know if there's a good way to get under here and show you this, but you see this right here. See if I can get some more light in there, make it easier to see. You see this right here. This is what actually drives your water pump. This is your water pump up here. Okay, it doesn't outrun off of the belt, but what they do is they use this pulley, and it rides on the outside of the water pump, of the serpentine belt. But it rides up there real close to it, of course, so that it doesn't slip. Now, looking at this thing, there's no obvious way, well, how am I going to loosen this pulley? Well, if you look right here where my hand is, I'm going to point to it, there's a little tab that you pull out. Well, when you pull that thing out, if you'll watch the pulley comes out just enough to where you can push it up and get the belt out of the way. And then once you put the new belt back on there, you push it back in, as you can see, it goes back in, and you push the cap back in, and that's how you do it. Been working on cars since I was around 14, 15 years old. I'm 49 now, and I have never seen anything like this. So I know I was in for some surprises working on a Mini Cooper, but every time I turn around, I'm beginning to not be surprised anymore. Alright, so now we're going to remove 4 bolts holding the motor mount to the front of the engine. I've already supported the engine by the oil pan. And as you can see, if I wouldn't have removed that pipe and this upper brace, it'd be much harder to get these bolts off. Okay, so I got all of those loosened. And I also have to remove this ground strap right here too. Put that bolt back on there so I don't lose it. Move the ground strap back out of the way. Alright. Alright, the 4 smaller bolts are 13 millimeter. The one big bolt in the middle is 18 millimeter. That's the one that attaches it to the actual rubber mount. We'll go ahead and pause the video. You guys don't need to see me unscrewing 4 bolts.